Good evening, and welcome to Deerfield and to the next chapter in our Creative Mind series. And this chapter started several weeks ago when Trish Long, who is the director of Disney Company here in Ireland, was kind enough to attend a Creative Minds economic conference, which we held here just out on the lawn. About 500 people came to talk about how we could, both in Ireland and in the United States, merge our creative juices in order to maintain the wonderful relationship that currently exists between our two countries. And from that conversation with Trish comes tonight's conversation with two of the leading stars in animation on this planet. You all know about Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. and Up, and now the new Pixar blockbuster Inside Out has come to Ireland and will be available to all of us before too long. The Creative Mind series, of which this is the next installment, is an effort by us at the U.S. Embassy here in Dublin to deepen the already strong bonds and cultural ties between the United States and Ireland. You know, our two countries have been linked by blood, by history, by culture for several hundred years now. And that unification, that bond has created now a tremendous economic engine that employs thousands of people, both in the United States and Ireland. It creates jobs. It's created a shared prosperity between our two countries, and it has deepened long-standing familial ties. And what Creative Minds is attempting to do by grabbing the time of two wonderfully creative animators, by grabbing people versed in entrepreneurship, in technology, restaurateurs, authors, other creators, by connecting those creative minds in Ireland with those creative minds in the United States, we are attempting to make sure that the wonderful relationship that exists between Ireland and the United States continues on to the next generation of American and Irish leaders. And so we're very grateful that you could come tonight to participate in this conversation. We are very, very fortunate to have Aideen Gormley from RTE. She has a wonderful program called Movies and Musicals, in which she demonstrates her knowledge and her love of the entertainment world. And so she is going to lead our conversation tonight with our two stars that we are so very privileged to be able to have with us tonight. So, Aideen.
Thanks, Ambassador O'Malley, and thanks indeed for the invitation and the creation of this wonderful series. Thanks also to the Walt Disney Company Ireland. As the Ambassador said, we have two wonderful guests here tonight, Pete Docter and Jonas Rivera, two of the key figures in Pixar animation at the moment. Pete Docter from Minnesota, he was the third animator hired by the studios, and he has lent his considerable talents to such blockbusters as Toy Story. He went on to direct Up and the latest hit from Pixar, Inside Out. Jonas Rivera joined Pixar in 1994 as an intern and began work as production assistant on Toy Story. He went on to work on roles in production on pretty much all subsequent Pixar films, working as producer alongside Pete on Up, and I think we just know now they make such a great team once again together for Inside Out. So some of you will have seen a preview of Inside Out, and I think you'll agree that it just makes for wonderful viewing. And we'll be talking a little bit about that tonight, but I hope we'll also find out just what it's like to be part of a creative team like this, not only for hit movies, but much loved movies, some of the best loved movies that have hit the big screen over the last 20 years or so. I think it's worth noting too that they have worked very hard for what they've done, but they are very good examples, I think, of just that idea to do what you love and success will follow. They have followed their dreams, they are passionate about what they do, and I think that will come across tonight. So we're going to talk for about half an hour or so, and then we will open it up to you. We'd be delighted to get your questions. So can I ask you please to give a warm welcome to our two guests, Pete Docter and Jonas Rivera.
Thanks for having us. This is fun.
So you've spent the weekend, in fact, in Galway. This isn't quite a flying visit for you. How was that?
Oh, it's fantastic. We had a great time at the festival there.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah.
We're a little bit in shock. I mean, the ambassador talked about privilege. I'll tell you, when you're an animator and working on animated movies in California, you never dreamed this is where you would wind up.
Yeah.
No.
So the whole thing is so overwhelming. We're so proud to be here, and the film festival and the great team here in Ireland. It's really a whirlwind for us.
We're going to start by going back in time a little. I'm wondering, Pete, first of all, did you pick Pixar or did Pixar pick you?
Well, it was a time when nobody knew about Pixar. If you knew about it, it was probably because of the computers that they were building, which have since been disbanded. But it wasn't a place that any of us coming out of art school even applied. But it was because I had done a couple of short films that John Lasseter had seen. John Lasseter, of course, being the chief creative officer of the company and basically our leader. And he had done a bunch of short films that I had seen of Pixar, so we made the introduction, and I started there really when nothing much was happening. They were starting to do some commercials, but this was well before Toy Story had come along, so it was I was born at a good year. Yeah.
You came in a good year, though, Jonas. As I mentioned, 1994 as an intern. That would have been about the last year of production of Toy Story. Was there a feeling that you were creating something special? Can you give us an idea of the atmosphere around that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel, because I grew up loving Disney and wanting to work for Disney, and I was a film student in San Francisco, heard about Pixar. I saw the short films that Pete's talking about. I didn't know about Toy Story. I called them and asked if they needed help. I needed some credits for school, and they said, well, we'll come down and we do need help, and it was crazy. I walked in, and it was just this, I don't know, I think of it as like a punk rock version of what I imagined Disney being in the 30s. It was just this great collaboration and computer scientists and animators, and I'll never forget, they brought me into the screening room on the second day, and they showed on film, it was the first thing done on Toy Story, was the scene, if you remember, Buzz Lightyear comes from the birthday party, and the army men go down the stairs, to report.
To spy on the presents.
Yeah, on the birthday presents, and I almost cried. It was like seeing Fantasia or something for the first time, and I felt this is where I want to be. I said I called my mother, I said they're going to have a hard time getting rid of me. And they have, actually. It's been 20 years ago.
We've been trying ever since.
Right.
Yeah. But it strikes me, Pete, that it was a place where like-minded people just seemed to find each other.
Yeah.
And also for you, it seemed to be a place where they encouraged you to dabble in all kinds of things, a bit of directing, a bit of animation, write a bit. Was that the way it was?
Well, it was small enough. At the beginning, there were only 10 of us in the animation group. The rest were making hardware and medical imaging and all these other kind of experimental things. So we all had to kind of do everything. We all did story work and design work. And now, of course, as it's gotten bigger, it's more specialized, and you really kind of find your niche. But at that time, it was very wide open, which was great training. And I always tell people when they're looking to get out of school into the world, find a small company where you can really make a bigger impact, as opposed to being a smaller piece of a big company.
And you were the first intern, weren't you, Jonas?
Yeah, in fact I was.
Because I was looking at the website the other day, and it seems to be a place where they're welcoming interns, come work for us. But you were the first in there. Yeah,
I'm proud of that. I mean, there was not much of a structure, again, as Pete says, to the production of it, and so we made it up as we went. Well, now there's so many interns. I think there's more interns than apply to Harvard or some crazy number they were saying.
Catmull told me there were like 12,000 people that applied for internships last year.
We sort of joke that we wouldn't be hired now. We're so glad we fell into when we did.
But are you seeing young Pete's and Jonas's in there? Or they're
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of great young talent. And
way better than us.
Yeah. I introduced, I had to go and speak to the interns, the new group coming in, and a lot of them said, the first movie I saw in the movies was Toy Story.
Yeah.
I said, oh, I'm getting old now. I'm the old timer. You know? So it's a young company. We've all grown up there.
What about when you were growing up, though? You know the way comedians are often asked. You must have been the joker in the class. Were there signs in your childhood that this is where you were going to end up?
Well, you know how there's always a kid who draws dragons and horses and everybody else like, draw, you know, a bear or whatever. That was not me. I wanted to be that guy, but I really struggled with drawing until I found flip books, this idea that you can draw something a little different on every page of your math book and flip through, and that's what got me hooked on math. No. It hooked me, though, the motion, the idea of movement, and as I got better, the idea of acting, that you could draw characters that you swear you can kind of tell what they're thinking. And I think that's really at the core of everything we do, is this idea of character-based animation, really getting inside of a character's head. They're completely made up, completely fabricated, but it's, you know, and really, you know, I did flip books my whole childhood. We're still basically doing the same thing, only we're using millions of dollars worth of computer equipment to do that.
Yeah. What about you, Jonas, growing up?
Yeah, I think when I grew up, I mean, I wanted to be an animator. I loved animation, specifically the Disney animation and the classic films. And I was probably 8 or 9 years old when I realized that I wasn't going to be I was not a great artist. I'm still not, but I loved it so much. I was so passionate about it. And one of the things about coming into Pixar early, I think we all found, like, oh, people like us, we all were sort of into the same things, grew up with the movies and wanting to be artists and make things. And maybe we probably weren't the most popular kids in school or out as much. I mean, animation is a faceless medium, so we've sort of made careers out of hiding behind, you know, the art, but that's how we speak and express ourselves. So all of us, I think, found that club.
Yeah,
you know,
for me it was absolutely true. It was a kind of a lonely childhood of, you know, watching Chuck Jones cartoons and whoa, and my friends strangely weren't as fascinated by that. And so it wasn't until I came to Pixar, I felt like, oh, I found my tribe. This is where I really belong. Yeah. And we could spend hours talking about all the Chuck Jones cartoons.
Exactly. You were talking there, though, about the drawing and making it come alive. I know John Lasseter has talked about this a lot, the whole CGI thing, which could be cold, but it's not. And I know, I think he said a writer said to him, oh, am I getting the drawing part right? But they said, no, how's the character feeling?
Right.
And that's always what you have to think about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really all about the same things I think live action or any writers will think about, is getting inside the character's head, creating a character that seems real and truthful and relatable, even though the films might be about characters that are cars or insects or something. We are always thinking about ourselves and how to try to put something of our own life experience up there on the screen with these guys.
In terms of how the technology has gone, though, I know you're good friends with Tom Moore, who's here, the director of Song of the Sea, and that was also opening in Galway this weekend. How does something like hand-drawn traditional sit alongside what you're doing, do you think?
I always think of them as, I don't make a distinction in my head. As we're creating the stories, I think you're just creating these worlds, you're taking people to different places that maybe exist, but you're looking at it from a different way, a different angle, and I think that's what makes it really a unique medium, is this idea of seeing the world from a different perspective. And it's not really till we start to really lock the story in that we start to think about the execution. Although that's not totally true. I will also say, like Toy Story was the first one we did, the first computer animated film, and there was limitations at the time to the technology. Everything we did, whether we intended it or not, started to kind of look like plastic. So he said, well, let's just embrace that. We'll make the characters about, the characters themselves are plastic, they're about toys. So we tried to really think about the limitations of the medium and fold that into the idea. But that aside, I think we're just telling stories. And of course, we love some of the reason I'm here is because of hand-drawn animation. Okay. I love it. And I love Tom's films. They're beautiful.
They are indeed. Let's talk about this latest crazy in some way idea you had for Inside Out. We meet 11-year-old Riley, this young girl, and the question is what is going on in her head? And so these guys came up with the idea that we would show 5 personified feelings or emotions: joy, sadness, disgust, fear, and anger. This is, in a way, a personal story for you because you did look at your 11-year-old daughter, right, Pete, and ask that question, what's going on in her head?
Yeah, if you've seen the film Up, the kid at the beginning, young Ellie, She was about, my own daughter's name is Ellie, and she was about 9 as she did the voice for that character. And she was kind of like that character. We have pictures of her with like a broken arm, and she's running around talking to people and kind of a little whirling dervish. And then as she got older, she got a little more quiet. And this really ticked my own memory of growing up, and that was a difficult time for me. And as we talked about it at work, Jonas has kids, Ronnie Dale Carmen, who's the co-director, we all talked about this difficulty of growing up and thought there's something that could be said about that, something to talk about there, because it's a difficult time, and it's a kind of, for me, a time of loss in a sense. As you grow older, it feels like you leave something or lose something that is vital. And of course, we're trying to make a career of not losing that, of holding on to it.
But sort of created this Peter Pan, Neverland kind of philosophy at Pixar, and that fascinated us. When he came in, I thought it was really great, because I know Ellie, and we've worked together for years, but he came with just such a beautiful top-line pitch, and it was, what if we told a story about a little girl, but she's not the main character, she's the setting, and we sit forward, and inside her head are the emotions, and we're going to tell a story through the point of view of those emotions and personify those. And that, you created this great volley, and I thought that was just worthy of a movie, so we developed that, and it just felt personal and truthful, and we couldn't promise it would be a movie, but it felt like the seeds that could lead to something really interesting.
But there was a huge amount of invention for this. I mean, it's now out and we know it's a hit, but I'm wondering for those early days, I mean, pitching that idea to your superiors, how did it go down?
Well, thankfully, we work with creative people. So John Lasseter, I pitched to him, and he right away sort of leaned forward, and he saw the potential in it. It was interesting. This film, about half people I would pitch it to would go, "Oh yeah?" And other people would kind of tilt their head like the RCA dog, like, what are you talking about? So it was a really kind of split early on, and that made me a little nervous, because I thought, okay, maybe this, to me it seems very obvious, the idea and the possibility of taking people and explaining why songs get stuck in your head, or why can't I remember, or those things that we all deal with. We get to play with those ideas in this film.
Yeah. But you were really starting with a blank slate. You had so much to create on this occasion. For those of you who've seen the movie, we now know what Joy looks like as a character. And I suppose some of it would have been straightforward. Sadness was going to be blue and anger was going to be red in terms of just the look of it. Tell us, just take Joy as an example and just the visual of Joy.
Well, yeah, very, very early on we played around with a lot of ideas. We thought, well, these are emotions. We want them to look the way our emotions feel to us. So they shouldn't be little people. Should they be fuzzy blobs? That looked a little much like a ghost or something. Eventually we settled on these kind of abstract shapes. Joy is like a star or an explosion. Sadness is like an upside down teardrop. Fear is kind of a raw nerve. So you have these very basic shapes that we sort of locked in on and then started to refine. It was largely just a lot of drawing, though.
And it was a lot on feel, which was interesting, because to your point, there was no point of reference. What does the memory look like? And you would describe things, and we would have to challenge our art department to then, just draw and immerse ourselves in these ideas until, you would go, that feels right, and then we'd kind of hone in on that. And we just sort of created this visual grammar that wasn't there. Headquarters and the mind and all these things we just got to make up. Some things were easy, like dream production. Felt like, oh, that's a theater or a stage, and that made sense. But the rest of it we just had to kind of make up, which was really fun, but also, really challenging.
I think a lot of people have said that it feels very sophisticated. There's a lot of depth and complexity of the idea. I think that's largely because it's a very abstract idea that we've made physical. So you're taking concepts that are hard to even talk about sometimes, but if you make them into, like, here's an object, here's a place, then it becomes much more understandable. And we've shown the film to 3-year-olds who seem to really get it. So it's really.
Our hope was we'd be able to help define things. We were in Disneyland where there's a guy walking down the street with a shirt that is grumpy. I'm grumpy or whatever. That's from the 30s, and it is so clear and so gettable. And we thought, this could be our version of the Seven Dwarfs a little bit. We could forever personify Joy. That's what she looks like. That's how she sounds, and anger and so forth, and the environment as well. And that was exciting. And we hope we've stepped that way a little bit.
So if you look at the characters, they're made up of energy. They're like these tiny little particles that move slowly and hopefully not distractingly, but you get the sense that if they move too fast, they could kind of lose some, or Joy actually does as she zips around. And that was our attempt at making it physical, the idea of energy and feeling.
I want to come back to those characters in a moment, but I think for all of us here who aren't in the business, it seems extraordinary, just the whole process from beginning to end of this. It took 5 years. Can you give us an idea of how it starts and how much animation you get done a week?
You want to go through the process?
Yeah, I mean, it's, how much time do we have?
Yeah, in a nutshell, Jim.
5 years. I mean, it's about 3 of the 5 years is writing. I mean, there's tons of writing. What we do is we mock the entire movie up on storyboards once it's written, and then
Which is kind of like a comic book version of the film. It's like a little sketch, very rudimentary, but it's enough for us to visualize it.
Right, and we'll do the voices, and we'll record it, and then we'll film that, and we'll watch it. So you kind of get a simulation of a motion picture. And then we go, oh, it's terrible. And then we do it again. And we do it every 3 months. And we put it in front of our bosses, and we get notes. And it slowly starts to form into a movie. And about 2 years in, you start building the physical models and bringing in the engineers to figure out all the under-the-hood engineering that needs to do the rendering and so forth. And then about a year and a half, we start animating. You animate it in about 12 months. Yeah. I mean, how?
On a fast week, animators will do about, it's about a second a day.
Wow.
So in a week, they'll do about 5, obviously, seconds. So it's not very fast.
No, you're a very patient man, obviously. You have a lot of patience.
Yeah, it's glacial. We go, oh, this is so, when we score the film at the end,
the music.
We'll do 20 minutes of the score, in a day. And Michael Giacchino goes, oh, that was slow. We're going, what? That was like light speed to us. Slow down. So you have to be very patient in animation. You make a movie 1 frame at a time.
Yeah.
And so it's a long 350 people on the crew and coming and going and working on it with us. So it's a big team. We're the ones that get to sit up here, but there's so many talented people that really make it,
And in terms of the first people who see it, you mentioned there the 3-year-olds seeing it. Do you show it to obviously the John Lasseters, but family and friends first, or specific preview audiences? How does that work?
No, I don't think they would understand our first version because it was pretty bad. But what we do is we show first ourselves on the crew, and then we bring in. So right now at Pixar, I think there's maybe 6 other shows going on, 6 other movies that are being developed. So we'll bring all the storytellers from those movies to watch ours. And then we'll watch it and get together afterwards and discuss what worked and what didn't. And suggestions are made about how to improve things. And the nice thing is it's not some executive or what, it's a fellow filmmaker. So Brad Bird or John Lasseter might say, what I was thinking is da-da-da, they'll talk through a scene and you can see it in your head. And they're coming from the same place that I am is in terms of communicating to the audience. And sometimes it's easy to talk ethereally about, you need more humor. Well, okay, but how, know? And so give me some specifics.
Okay. Because speaking of humor and indeed sadness, I've spoken to people already tonight who saw Inside Out and are talking about tears. Most people I spoke to over the weekend mentioned the end of Toy Story 3, tears. They mentioned the married life sequence in Up, tears. But so many laughs as well. I'm wondering, because you're making something like this over 5 years, do you know the buttons you're pressing? Are you too close to it at that point? Is it kind of interesting for you when you put an audience in front of it to see those reactions?
For me, I think of it less about pushing buttons and more finding truth and where I'm going to be emotional. So as we came up with this story, the sequence, well, I won't give anything away for people who haven't seen it, but there's a couple sequences that we arrived at very early that just felt like that's what the movie is about. That's the core of what this film is, and it moves me. And so it actually usually takes a number of iterations and sometimes even years to make it move someone else.
Okay.
Because you make it and it's kind of like, well, I sort of got a little, but not, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So you have to kind of work and rework it over and over until you kind of find the nugget of what it is, how to put it across. So in other words, it's like an idea of something sometimes takes a number of attempts to really make it work.
What I think is extraordinary what you do, though, is to give an adult in the audience the same enjoyment, but a different enjoyment maybe to the 3-year-old or the 4-year-old. How do you strike that balance?
Well, we start by making the film for us.
Okay.
And my sort of meter of success is, do I get Andrew Stanton or John Lasseter, these other filmmakers that we work with, are they laughing? Are they crying? So that's really my target. not kids. Although you could argue that it's kind of the same thing with some of them. But
Kind of like 10-year-olds anyway.
But then along the way, we are conscious that little kids and grandmas and everybody are going to see it. So we really think of the film in layers. We'll go through the film and say, you know, I really want more to take advantage of the location. I want more mind-related humor. So we'll think about, you know, deja vu or train of thought or whatever it is, and we'll try to pump those gags in. Then we'll go through again and say, kids are going to be watching. We want more physical stuff. We want more verbal humor, whatever it is. So we kind of work through the film again and again.
But I think at the core, I mean, part of that is we've never really thought of animation as for kids. Our point of departure isn't to make a children's movie. You know, in fact, we don't even think of anime. Some people call it a genre, which sort of riles us up because it's not a genre. The horror movie and a Western are a genre. Animation's a medium, right? And so we just set out to make a film that has some sort of personal and emotional core, happens to be animated because that's the medium we love.
There have been animated films that are horror films or you know, Westerns.
Right, and that just, I don't know, that's just the way we frame it. And so every day we come to work, that's how we think about it. And then to Pete's point, of course we think about kids and families. I mean, these are sort of echoed from the great Disney movies we grew up on, and that's, I think there's a great sophistication of those movies in that they play for, you know, different age. I see Bambi very differently now as an adult as I did when I was 5. You know, when I was traumatized by it, to be honest.
But during the process before the finished, you know, when you're showing it to people, I mean, for example, with Monsters, Inc., was there a moment of you going, gosh, this might be a bit scary, this bit for a kid, or this in another movie, this might be a bit sad? Do you change things early days, wondering is this okay for the kids' audience?
Yeah, sometimes we do. On that one, we did go a little bit far. I find it's easier to go too far and pull back than to tiptoe towards something with little steps. So sometimes we'll go a little extreme. On that one, you know, if you remember the film, there's the beginning where there's this whole scare, and it turns out to be a practice or like a tryout. We found that the audience was a little, when we tested it, they were a little scared and they were quiet through a lot of the laughs after that because we hadn't given them permission to laugh. You know, you're setting the tone. You're saying, this is the kind of movie this is. So we did 2 changes to that. We did a title sequence, which was playful cutout shapes and things. And we also made the monster who was going to scare the kids slip and fall and run around because he sat on some jacks, and very physical comedy. And that allowed then laughter after that. It's a little bit like the Comedy Tonight song in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Farm. I heard that was added later for the same basic reason. So.
Coming back to some of the characters in Inside Out and the emotions that they bring up, I particularly loved sadness, actually, because she made me laugh, you wouldn't think, but she did, and this sort of lethargic figure you gave us. But I thought it was interesting, you didn't make her a nasty character or a negative character, she was very apologetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did that come straight away for you?
Well, she, like all the characters, really evolved slowly over time. We initially had made her a little more on the nose. She would show up, in fact, very early on, it was a male. But as the character evolved, she would come into the room and just cry all the time. And then as we started working and listening to Phyllis Smith, the actor, she, we noticed in a number of other roles, would come at things from a very, a place of insecurity. And we thought, man, we could use that. Because in a way, sadness in the film as a character is the most evolved. She's knowing what needs to happen way before anybody else. But she doesn't have the sort of the authority. She doesn't allow herself to act on it. And so that sense of insecurity is really the way it gave her entire arc, really. And it was from watching Phyllis, which is true of all the characters, I think. The voice cast, probably in ways that they're not even aware of, end up affecting those characters pretty big.
That's interesting about the male-female thing, because you've 3 female voices in this. So joy, sadness, and disgust are female, anger and fear are male. So that mightn't have been the case from the beginning? It might have changed?
No, we had, well, from the beginning we knew we wanted to create as much contrast and breadth within the film, so that's why we looked for voices not only are great and appropriate for themselves, but also sound really wonderful against each other, so that everybody's clearly unique and has their own kind of audio space as well as visual.
There's been a lot of talk about Amy Poehler and how amazing she is.
Oh, yeah, she's
There's
great.
some great
Yeah.
footage online, actually, of you in the edit booth with her, and you look joyous. You
Oh, yeah.
really do. It's that sort of feeling that you got it right. You
She's
picked the right person.
fantastic.
Well, Amy Poehler is effortlessly funny and nice, and she is Joy. I mean, when we met her, Joy was a hard character. I mean, we really struggled with that as a character, and we knew we needed a really great actor. And I mean, the struggle basically was her name's Joy, so she's positive all the time, and she's our main character.
But some of our early attempts at the writing, where she was so energetic and positive all the time, you kind of wanted to punch her in the face.
Right, everyone hated
get
our
away.
main character.
Yeah.
We actually told that to Amy. She says, I think I know how to do that. I can get away with a lot, and she's just so skilled.
Yeah.
But we went to New York to meet her. We were such fans of hers. And I'll never remember we had lunch with her, and then we were going to go up to the room to show her the pitch, and we got into an elevator, and what happened, it stopped. There was a gentleman in the elevator, and went up to this 3rd floor, and he got off. We were up on the 10th floor, and he walked out, and she said to him, "You got a lot of work to do, buddy. Keep going. You got to get to the top." The door shut. And we thought, oh, she just made riding an elevator fun. She's Joy. Like, that would be Joy. So she really unlocked the writing. In fact, she helped her. She came on and helped us write.
literally,
We went through the
we
whole
sat
movie,
with her
and she would kind of come up with ideas or ways to handle a scene, and just really helped us carve a great path for the character.
You must be aware at this point that this film has become quite a conversation helper, if you like, between parents and children in terms of talking about emotions, and also adults have talked about it, particularly adults who have suffered from depression, talking about how you weirdly seem to, in a visceral way, show what it's like to suffer from depression, or just show those emotions. In a way, that's a huge responsibility, but it's a great thing to come out of the movie as well.
Yeah, the initial attraction was just the fun of it. As we first came up with this idea and developed it, I thought this could be great, funny stuff. And then as we got into it, we realized it could be emotional. But it wasn't for a while into it that we realized that it could be potentially important. So that's been kind of gravy on top, or whatever you want to say. It was not something we set out to do. We just felt like this concept had a lot of richness, a lot of potential, which actually was a challenge for a long time. The film, we would pitch it early on, and people would go, "Wow, this is going to be great," and then we'd show them the film, and they'd be like, "Someday it's going to be great." They saw the potential, but they weren't seeing it on the screen for a long time.
There was something about the research we did on we're making a movie about emotions, and we reached out to some scientists and some folks to help us, like, what are the clinical definitions and how many are there, and some of the things we were hearing back was just the definition of each emotion was fascinating to us. Like, for example, anger there's a reason that you have anger, right? And it's a sort of a champion of fairness.
Yeah.
So fairness and being treated unfairly is what drives anger, and anger is often channeled in social justice and so forth. And that was interesting. That you think of it as negative, but there's actually a positive reason. And all of them. Fear is to keep you safe. Disgust, I thought, was fascinating, which was disgust, all the way back to Darwin's definition, is the physical expulsion of something bad. So it's there to keep you, to prevent you from being poisoned physically. And we applied that socially, to an 11-year-old girl. And anyway,
humans in general.
Humans in general, right? But this was fascinating. Like, they're not only fun little characters, but they have important jobs. And maybe this is a very American thing, as we think about it. We spend a lot of time trying to avoid them all. Don't be sad, we say. Don't be angry. We even say, don't goof off. Don't be a goof. We don't know why we do that. And that question led to, I think, a lot of the writing. And it started to become, to me, this is more than just fun. This is important. That's an important thing. And it gave us a good arena, I think, to tell a story.
We might come back to that later with questions.
Sure.
We'll come to questions from the audience in just a moment. I have to come back to music because it's me. And you spoke about Michael Giacchino. Early days of the Pixar films, of course, was Randy Newman, and wrote such amazing songs for the early Toy Story movies and Monsters, Inc. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the music means to you? Because you're very musical yourself, Pete.
Yeah, I grew up playing violin and bass and other instruments, but music has this ability to kind of tap into a feeling in a way that kind of bypasses your frontal lobe, right? So it goes right past the logic center and hits the emotion without you even being conscious or aware of it. A little bit like lighting, I think, can do the same type of thing, where you set the mood in a place, and you're not going, why is it dark? Why is there a spotlight? You know, you're just accepting it. Music does that, and so it's really a vital part of our storytelling. Michael, I think, is not only a great composer, but a great storyteller. So he'll approach things emotionally. We'll have a discussion early on and talk about the film, we watch it, and then the way he's worked was to go away, this happened on Up as well, he would go away and say, okay, I watched the film, this is not to anything, but I composed this little short piece of music that this is how I feel when I watch the movie. And then he hit play. And on this film, Jonas and I are listening, and the music starts, and we both kind of look at each other, and we just, your heart kind of explodes. He totally nailed it. He has a daughter who's the same age as my daughter, who are their friends, and so it talked about how a lot of times he would just picture her growing up, and the same kind of feelings that we had, that sort of sense of, oh, I'm not going to be playing on the floor with trains and dolls anymore. This is a new chapter of our life, and something is being left behind. I think a lot of that same feeling that drove us to make the picture ended up in the music as well.
It's a beautiful score. All right, we'll take some questions from the audience. If I could ask you just to wait until we get a microphone to you. If you'd like to raise your hand if you have a question. Anybody? One over here?
That's fascinating. I was wondering, just carrying on from the previous question about the emotions and how it can happen to people with insecurities or mental illness. Do you see Pixar ever doing something like this into a much darker place than the films that have been done? And could animation serve that purpose within Pixar as it's situated?
Well, there have been films, not necessarily at Pixar, they've gone to very dark places about, post-apocalyptic after nuclear wars and, death and some very deep things. So I think it definitely can speak to that. In terms of Pixar, I don't think we can really make any predictions. It's really having to do with the way we talk about it is it's a director-driven studio. Every filmmaker comes in with something that they're wanting to talk about, and we'll follow the story as that leads.
Yeah, I think as a medium, animation has the ability to do anything. Our taste, I think we're still so rooted in sort of the classic, the Disney animation, and those are the movies we love to make, and we tend to lean that way. But anything could happen. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Can you raise your hand, please?
Thank you. I was just wondering, in the writing process, when do you know that the script is the final draft? Any changes to the introduction of the script, like big or small? I was just wondering.
As you can tell from Pete's laugh.
I think we knew the script was done when the film was released.
I find it, yeah. It's constantly being rewritten, every scene, after every screening, before and after every recording session with an actor. We have been driving to the session, and Pete's quiet, and he's in the back seat, and I turn around, sure enough, he's making notes on the pages that we've locked, because of a new idea. And so you slowly start to close doors on sequences. Obviously, you have to have the dialogue written before you animate. So once it's animated, the cement sort of dries. But even then, notes will come in, or you'll have something that will work better, and we'll kind of vet that out. But it's really not done in writing until the last shot kind of goes through.
What Jonas is talking about with the sequences, we divide the whole film up into smaller chunks. And so each one of those, some of the chunks will be ready right away, like the dinner scene in the film, if you've seen it, and we've used that in the advertising, seemed to really spark. People got that. And so that was the first sequence on this film that went into production. So we're hopefully, once it's animated, we're not making any changes. I say hopefully. Sometimes we do. But then the rest of it is changing around it. And so you're kind of finding it in these pieces. It's a little bit, like a tent or something. You find these poles that hold up the rest of the story. And then the rest of it comes up to meet that level, I guess, is one way of looking at it.
It's sort of why our films, I think, work, because we give ourselves the time, and the studio supports us to iterate as we go. And it's sort of why I have a job as producer, because I'm trying to shut those doors, but with too much pressure and not enough time, then you kind of upset the creative of the film. but at the same time, you know, we want it to be great, and you're informed by what you see and what you hear, and so there's this creative feedback that we support.
But that is something worth talking about too, because I think a lot of studios, you go anywhere and people talk about story is important. Story. But then they'll say, well, we're out of time. We just have to do what you're, you know. At Pixar, we actually allow ourselves the time to make mistakes. In fact, it's expected that it will be wrong for quite a while, because every story is.
Yeah.
And it's going to be lousy. And so we have a built-in process that basically expects that, supports it, and allows us to iterate a lot.
Anybody else there?
Sorry.
Hi.
One of the things that was always between kind of good about Pixar was never let the technology hold you back. We're always looking for a solution. So the question is, and I think studying the errors was one thing I remember reading about all the question to try to solve. How do you always make sure that creativity stays as the lead rather than the technology? And the other question is, has there ever been anything whereby you haven't found a solution?
Well, that's a great question. The technology, obviously we're based in technology at the studio. John Lasseter had said early on that the art challenges the technology, but the technology comes around and inspires the art. And that's very important. It's sort of cornerstone to what we do. Pixar is this collision between computer science and artists. And so, I mean, there's things, even Joy, for example. Joy, the main character, who Pete described as being kind of made up this compression of energy. And that was hard to figure out. So we had a lot of our engineers and artists working on what that would be, sort of like almost champagne bubbles, and all these things were built to make that work. She's sort of this see-through shell with this fog that fills in between the geometry, and when she moves, these particles face camera, and all this stuff was done. The render that actually was the one that you liked best, that bought off on, was one they were going to throw away because it was wrong. It was some artifact and it wasn't working, and I happened to see it. I go, show that to Pete, that's kind of cool, and you saw it and went, that's the one, let's go
because we adjusted from there. But
so everything, the technology, it was an example of coming around and being what actually seemed right, but it wasn't what they were going for. So I don't know, there's this really great cycle of collaboration that does. I don't know, has there ever been anything we haven't?
well, I was thinking back to like Toy Story. I remember we had specific things like, I don't know if you remember the movie, there's a bit where Sid burns a hole in Woody's forehead with a magnifying glass, and as soon as Sid leaves, he runs and dunks his head what originally was going to be a bowl of dog water. So it was going to splash and then go
Right.
and cool it down. We couldn't do water at that time, or at least it would have been very expensive. So we came up with a different solution, which was to stage it low and
Yeah.
make Cheerios fall, or Fruit Loops.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
you sort of imply that there's some sort of liquid in there without having to show it. So a lot of times there's little creative things that we ignore all the technological difficulties early on, and then later when we come having time to do it,
Yeah.
sometimes we say, well, is there a cheaper way to do this that kind of gets the same thing across?
Yeah. But since then, I mean, Merida's hair,
Yeah.
you know, in the film Brave, took a team of engineers to figure out. We're very proud of. And it's fun to watch a Pixar movie with Pixar. We have our families come because they'll clap at the strangest things. Like Merida will slide her satchel over her shoulder, and half the room will applaud.
Because we know all the work that went into that.
My wife's like, "What happened?"
Yeah.
Oh, it was an expensive shot. Yeah. Why was that great?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, the point along the process and how conscious an injection is of adult humor in the film, because of, you know, it's for your children and parents programming their children, and I find that most of the movies that we see and that the parents enjoy, and a lot of times it's humor that the kids don't understand.
Right.
But is a conscious injection of that to entertain the parents as well, or more so?
Yeah, no, I mean, for this film, just as an example, I mean, we were definitely thinking of that, wanting to entertain ourselves. We know, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, but we had Bill Hader and Amy Poehler and all these guys who are working on
Black
SNL
and everything,
and are entertaining audiences of adults, and for some reason that helped set my brain a little bit in terms of writing for them. But even things like, there's a joke in the film where Joy accidentally knocks over these two boxes. One says facts, and the other says opinions. And she says, oh no, they're all mixed up. And another character says, oh, don't worry, happens all the time. And he just loads them all in the facts box. And that was a joke that we worked really hard on, and it, I think is pretty specific to adults. Although your son laughed.
Yeah, we thought it was funny because my son's 3 and almost 4, right? And we brought him to see it for the first time, and he cracked up at that. And I thought, how? Why does that work? And my wife said, well, he laughed because they spilled. So to him, it was like a spilling milk joke.
Yeah.
So he'll see that joke very differently as he gets older. But we do work it, and we are conscious of it. We want it to be so if parents are stuck watching it on DVD 100 times, that there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes?
Gurmargaret, my question is about language. One of the things that happens that you guys maybe can't control completely is when your films are versioned into other languages. How does that work? How conscious are you that all your verbal humor is going to, a voice artist is going to have to deal with it in another language?
Yeah, we are conscious of it and we think about it. Luckily, we work at Disney. Character Voices International is this group that casts around the world, and they come to us to talk about like what kind of character is this? And for example, the Mater is the tow truck in Cars, who's sort of written as this redneck hillbilly. Well, that was very tough to cast in Vietnam, right? But they did, and they found a version of that character around the world, and it's pretty. I mean, they do a great job.
They do.
We give them guidance and make sure that it's correct in terms of the personality, but they do the work, and they do an amazing job. And we do think about things. There are things in the movies that don't translate. There are figures of speech. I mean, one in this film, in Inside Out, we use the train of thought as a concept and a thing. And they told us in Japan that
Doesn't make any sense.
So we did. It's such a visual piece of the movie. We're like, well, it'll be a cool train. Yeah. In Japan. So some things we can't quite, make work, but we do think about it. One of the other things, we go through the movie graphically. Any storytelling that's done on a sign, or anything, we will actually rebuild and re-render the shot, and then cut that in for each territory, so that it feels like, it's made for everybody around the world.
So there's a healthy amount of work done at Pixar to make that happen. But we do try to make it like this was a film that was made in this country, so that it's not an export,
Right.
is our goal.
Anybody else?
Hi there. Pixar is kind of famous for a lot of its running jokes, the little things it hides in every single film that it releases. So my question is just kind of, do you do that as a reward to your fans, or as just jokes for yourself to see how often you can fit these little details in?
I think it started as for us, and it's become sort of a little treasure hunt for the fans, so we continue to do it.
Yeah.
There's a tradition of always sneaking in something from the film that hasn't come out yet, in the film. And
That started on Monsters. At the very end, Sully is putting this little girl back in her bedroom, and she's handing him a bunch of toys, and one of them is Nemo.
Yeah.
There's a little rubber fish of Nemo that was from the next film at that time.
of course, it came out, nobody knew, but we were like, oh, that's... Nobody cares.
Yeah. And then we have a bunch of other stuff, like the Pizza Planet truck that was in the first film, and different things like this,
Right.
which, like you say, it was just to amuse us originally. Yeah.
As an animation student at one point, I understand that animation takes a very long time, and when you need to change keyframes, you have to change lots of things to make keyframes work. So I'm just wondering, has your animators ever got non-motivated or unmotivated from doing its constant changes over and over? And if they do get unmotivated, what do you do to keep them motivated because of the amount of tweaks they have to do?
That's a great question.
I can only think of one time when, I think it was on Monsters, and I was working on the scene where Boo is in bed and Sully can't get her to go to sleep, and she finally just goes, and she falls asleep. And we had done, I think, 5 or 6 other versions of that, where Tasha, the animator, was trying different ideas, and it wasn't funny, and we kept playing with it, and finally she just said, I won't do another one until you tell me exactly what you want. That was the only, most of the time they're very collaborative and open to change, and they really just want it to be good. In fact, I think that's something that both of our job is to tell people, okay, good enough, stop working on it so we can go on to the next thing, because everybody wants to make it so good.
Yeah, it's true. One of the things we do for animation in all the departments is we're very open. I mean, we've gotten up in front of our entire crew and said, we don't know what to do right now, but we're going to find out. And so we let people know when there's sort of turbulence or there's changes in the story. Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't. And I think the crew responds to that. They seem to know when to slow down, and then when we need them to go faster, they'll respond. They built a pretty good trust there. But yeah, to Pete's point, nobody at Pixar, probably Tom would agree too, at any studio, nobody says the words, I'm done with this shot, or this drawing, or this sculpture. And I help them say that they're done. And,
the only reason it's done is because the time's up.
Yeah, the time is up, right.
Just off the back of that, we've also been invited questions on Twitter this evening. One came in from Mark Jackson saying, is it difficult as an animator when work is carried out in Nation X for a company based in Nation Y to get a message across as to how you as an animator want the work to look?
Well, of course, we're lucky to have everybody in-house, so, and not only in-house, they're not in the same country, they're in the same location physically in Emeryville, California, so we're pretty fortunate that the reviews and such are all in person. We don't have to communicate across Skype or anything, and that's pretty true. Well, the one time we'll use Skype is working with actors, and usually I don't like to do it for the first couple sessions because we want to establish kind of a rapport and understand there's all these little hidden body language things that you pick up on when you're in person that just is invisible somehow.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if we need to pick up just a couple lines and the actor lives across the country and we don't want to fly all the way out there, we'll use it in that instance.
Somewhere in Limerick or Castlebar tonight, there's a young Peter or a young Jonas listening to us and following us on our website, and they've been filling up their math books for the last couple of years with these. So, what would be the advice that you would give to a creative, talented young person who is listening and feels a dream coming on? What would you say to them?
I think it's no accident why there's been such great animation done in Ireland. It's a country that has great stories. I swear, even just today, we've had several conversations with people in just normal conversation that use the language so beautifully and richly. It makes total sense why that's the case.
Yeah.
And I think for us, it's such a visual medium that I would encourage people to keep a sketchbook. And even if I know I am always frustrated with my drawings. They kind of like, oh, that's not the way I meant it to turn out.
Right.
But the thing that it does is it focuses you and allows you to see things, details that you might otherwise just ignore. I mean, even as I'm looking out here and noticing the detail over the door and all these intricate, I might not have even seen that had I not thought about how would it be to draw that. So I think, and of course, behavior, the way a person sits or holds themselves or holds a fork, all these little things that you end up putting into the movies, that's all useful.
Yeah, and I would add to that, because you're talking about observation and acting on it, and I would add to that, and this sounds so simple, but doing, right? There's so many students and young kids that talk about wanting to be in movies or wanting to make music, or and it's especially today with all the technology, just do. We always tell people, just go, make a movie, start animating. It's those are the people that tend to kind of find their way through it. I believe that passion is rewarded. When you come at it strongly and deeply, and that has sort of paid off for us. And the other thing, because this was sort of happened to both of us, really. I mean, I dreamed of working for Disney, right? And I think a lot of people have specific goals when they think of like making art or records or movies. I wanted to work at Disney, and that was where I had my sights set. And I stumbled into an alternate version of Disney. It was smaller and intimate, and I was able to kind of have a bigger experience. And I always say that to people now, like people say, oh, I dream of working at Pixar. And I love that because I want new young people to come to Pixar. But I bet there is a younger, different, cooler Pixar brewing by one of those kids that are in Limerick right now. And they should build it and they should find it, right? And it might lead them to, I mean, it led me to Disney, as fate would have it. I now do work for Disney. And so that's, I always try to pass that on because it just, I mean, for you and I both,
being
right?
open to whatever comes along.
Right.
And Jonas, off the back of that, in terms of young people tuned in who want to get into the production end of things, can you explain your role? Because the producer role can be very different. Some producers can be just involved with the finance.
Right.
You seem to be right across the creative vision, don't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think of myself as a creative producer. I mean, I'm certainly not writing pages or telling the artist what to do. Pete is the creative driver and vision of the film, but I shepherd it, and I think I try to be the film's first audience. I'm sort of like the first audience member. Pete will pitch to me and I'll sit forward and I think he'll use that, and we trust each other creatively. But my job is to run the organization of the whole production, the technical side, the creative side, through the music, the casting, some of the financing. You know, obviously we're protected by the studio, but I have to bring that in, you know, on budget and on time, and so that sort of buck stops with me. I feel sort of part head coach of a football team and part cheerleader, you know, and part executive. It's a strange hybrid of roles, but that's producing. Producing is basically getting things done. The way I have explained it before is the process, and we've talked about this through the writing and everything, is it's creative and it's open-ended. So in other words, there's a shape to it. There's an idea, there's a source of the idea, and then we build off of that creatively. There's sort of shaped like this. Pete comes with an idea for Inside Out. We get our story artists and our art directors and animators and writers, and we build that idea. So it's going like this. My job is at some point pull that shape into this. Like, what's the point? How do we bracket that and come to a decision so that we could build off of it? And it's hard to do because it's so, I don't know, just wild. And so I come in, and sometimes it's unfortunate, and sometimes I have to say, no, we have to. You know, we're running out of time. We have to save the film from itself. So it's a great role. It's the greatest. I could never have dreamed I'd have this job. I couldn't be more proud of it, and I really feel like the movies are in our handwriting some way because of it.
It's like I said at the top, it's clear the two of you love what you do. We've time for just one or two more questions.
Can I just ask a very quick question about the influence of Steve Jobs?
About the influence of, sorry, yeah. Yeah, I think Steve was a real formative in the company in the sense that he was a lot about trying new things and not just going along with the status quo, not just doing what was expected of a company. He would always be interested in pushing things. I think that extended to the creative vision of things as well. The types of stories we told. I mean, Toy Story, when that came out, there was an unwritten rule that animation had to be musicals. And I think it's in some part thanks to Steve that we were able to push, he sort of encouraged that, you know.
Yeah, he did. I mean, Pixar was sort of a reaction to a lot of things. I mean, the company is really partially born out of his counterculture, throw the ball the other way, you know, think different and all that. I mean, that was the attitude, right?
That coupled with the fact that he trusted us.
Yeah.
He didn't come in and try to micromanage and say, no, here's what you need to do. He would point out problems or flaws, and then he would always say, you know, you guys are the creative ones. I don't understand this. You're the ones that are going to make it work. So he would trust John Lasseter and the rest of us to make the movies, which is pretty rare, actually, weirdly, in Hollywood.
I have one question. I've always tried to kind of wrap my brain around the difference between directing people and directing animated characters. That the difference is, you know, when you shoot a shot or you're shooting and it's from this direction and, oh no, we don't like that, we're going to try it from the different angle. The difference between that with a person and just move the camera or whatever it be to, no, we're going to try to animate this a different way. Like, can you just kind of speak as to the difference between directing people and directing animated characters?
It's really probably remarkably similar, other than the fact that in the computer, none of that exists. It's all math, right? But in terms of the shots, you know, we talk about wides and overs and the same kind of language that you would, even in lighting, we have a key here and a fill there. So you really have to kind of know the same technology, the same kind of talk. It's just that within the computer, we think about it in layers. So I'll have a lot of reviews where it's just lighting, right? We're just looking at the lighting. The shot is moving and everything's happening, but I'm not focused on anything but the lighting because that's the team that I'm with. There's a different review way earlier that's just the camera, a different review that's just the acting. So whereas in live action, all of that has to be present and successful at once, we're thinking of it one little element at a time. I'm also, of course, working with the actors in a recording studio, so it's similar to the way you were discussing in live action. I am directing the actors as well. But in our case, that role is split in two. We have the voices, and then we have the animation, which of course is the movement, the expressions, the gestures that help bring that character to life. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's a little hard to comprehend somehow, but I think it's probably more similar than it's different.
Our director, we have a director of photography who's in charge of all the cameras and the lenses and the shots. And he said it's, live action, it's lights, camera, action, right? And in animation, it's camera, action, lights. Right. It's just as it's a different order to it.
Just as a final question, can you let us know what we can expect from you next? What are you working on?
Well, the next film that's coming out is called The Good Dinosaur, and it comes out, does it come out here?
In November.
In November, yeah, okay, that's right, 2 days after the US, I think. So this is the first year for us at Pixar that we're having 2 feature films in 1 year, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, it's really going to be fun. And then there's 6 or 7 films in various stages of development that will follow that. For us, this movie was really born out of us finishing the film up and kind of thinking, let's do something totally new. And we're having that same conversation now, right here. Let's have that conversation. Yeah. And so we're going to go back to Pixar and hopefully find a way to make another one that's completely new and different.
I've got a couple ideas I'm going to try to pitch to John in, like 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Set up?
We'll come back and hopefully
We'll
tell you about it.
Right?
Yeah.
We can't wait. Ambassador Malik, thank you so much for having us. Ladies
Thank
and
you.
gentlemen, thank you for being here. And please join me in thanking our guests tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador.
If you ever get tired of measuring progress 1 second a day, you can come join the U.S. government. We do it about the same way. Sometimes that's too fast for us. We have a great deal to be thankful for this evening. Trish, thank you for starting this conversation. Just having you present at the Creative Minds Economic Conference was a real boost, and this conversation that led to that is great. Thank you so much, Adine, for your passion and your knowledge about the movies and about how all this works. And this was like sitting at the feet of the master for Pete and Jonas. Thank you so very much. We are truly lucky. There's been a great, this side of the Atlantic, Tom's movie, The Song of the Sea, is just spectacular.
Yeah, go see it.
Yeah.
And to see. And thank you for sharing so much with us. It's great to see your passion, that you would take time out of all of the things that you're doing to share with us and promote the Creative Minds program is really spectacular. We greatly appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Please enjoy the house. As President Obama always says to guests at the White House, take all the paper napkins you want, just leave the silverware and the glasses. Please enjoy yourself, and thanks for coming, and keep tuned to Creative Minds.